This week, it's Gene Key 37 and the archetype of the mother. And this is a really cool gene key right now because just a couple weeks ago, we went through the 30 and the fire starter, purifying the desires of the shadow frequencies to allow for the 55 to come forth and create a massive fundamental change. And now with the 37, we are looking at a gene key that was the master key for the Piscean age. So over the last roughly 2,000 years, humanity has been evolving through this process of the 37. And in a certain way, we may even look at how humanity was, if we look at just before the beginning of the Piscean age, we were looking at the potential for a massive transformation within the collective of humanity. And that transformation happened through the manifestation of the energetic structure that has been referred to as the Christ energy. And this is, of course, the central aspect of Christian religion, but it's also been understood as a particular energetic frequency. And today, I think as we discuss this, that's how we're going to be looking at this energy, because as the Piscean age ends, we are now opening up for a new form of transformation that is going to take a very different direction for humanity. So that's a lot of context for you for our discussion today about the mother. Bella?
I love what we did for the art of this archetype. Maybe I can even pull it up. The art came from photos of mothers with children as they were breastfeeding. And then I think there was a program or something that Ashley was taking, putting those photos through, and then it came out. Actually, I think I want to pull it up. But yeah, this is the mother archetype, the way that we look at it in the archetypes of the 64 doors. And somehow I feel like the mother it explains itself. With the 37, it's very different if we compare it, for example, with the 22, which is also a Pisces gate, or the archetype of grace, or the 2, which is the feminine, which is also kind of a mother or yin archetype. When we are looking at the 37, for me, it's much more human. It is that mother with the child at the breast, and it's tribal. And tribal for me is also very human, how we as humans are living in communities with shared principles that everybody's accepting. And this is the way that we are touching each other. We're sitting around the same table, we're hugging each other. That's the very tribal way. And that's what this 37 does. And also in that very close connection with the 40, because it's both the programming partner and the harmonic gate. It's also the way that we have simplified it is the mother and the father, because we can see that there is something a little bit more. I mean, it really depends where you see it. If you see it at the Siddhic level, the 40 is probably the gate that is the most yin of all, in a way. It's like the complete surrender to God and everything. So, but at the level of the archetypes and at the more human level, I believe that we can see the 40 more as the yang and the resolve, the going out there and resolving things with that support of the mother. And then the mother is the tenderness in the house that the father can come home to, and the nurturing of the children, the nurturing of the family. So that's the basic roles of the 30 and the 40, 37 and the 40. That feels like you can't almost look at them not together when it's at the archetype level.
Yeah, and as we're looking at that, what really occurs to me when we look at an archetype like this, because of each of us has such a direct experience with our own personal mothers, it's very difficult for us to separate our understanding of an archetypal energy or an archetypal form, as it may be more accurately referred to, from the personal experience that we have with our biological parent or the parent that raised us, or any person who's performed that role for us in our lifetime. And one of the things that I think was really interesting about this particular energetic gene key is, obviously this relates to feminine qualities. You know, the city is tenderness, which is kind of an expression of the relationship between the mother and her baby. You know, you were talking about the image, which I think I've got you set up if you want to share it. That relationship is one of absolute intense love, and yet it is completely transcendent of any form of sexual tension as defined through the energies of the gene keys. Sexuality comes about through this tension, the contrast between masculine and feminine energies that generates this massive magnetic pull that happens through our biology. And in tenderness, there is a massive magnetic pull, but there is no contrasting energy that is driving in the direction of sexuality. It's of nurturing, it's of these feminine qualities. And I thought about how often recently I've seen in social media groups and other forms where conscious community is expanding in really big ways. And there are a lot of places that people are talking about the rising of the divine feminine. And it struck me that in the Gene Keys discussion of this energy, that the divine feminine energy is something that is already closely connected with people whose gender is female, who are born with a biological tendency toward feminine energies. And this is all said, of course, with the understanding that there are always exceptions to every, there's no such thing as a generalization. Every human being is completely unique. But it strikes me that what we're seeing is this growth of divine feminine amongst groups of women. It's like the beginning of a shift, not maybe even the transition of time where things are really starting to change into a new order. And I wondered how, if, or when, because there are men's groups that are doing lots of conscious work. When will there be men's groups that begin to focus on the integration of the divine feminine? Since within the masculine form is where a lot of the imbalance of this masculine feminine inequality has existed throughout the entire previous age. When the Piscean age began, it was at kind of this phase of the Roman Empire that it was coming towards its end. It still had a couple hundred more years to go before it completely fell apart. But it was at a time where patriarchal society structures were really coming into full fruition, and they would be established at every level of society throughout our world, to the degree that there were all of these societal movements that demonized the feminine energies through witch hunts, through even down to the order of the family. and how, when we look at these traditional roles between men and women in a family, the man goes out and does the work and women stay at home and nurture the children and do the whatever to take care of the home. These sort of stereotypes became part of our like the collective awareness. So Bella, I'm really curious how you see this mother archetype in a transformative way. How is it going to transition from this shadow of weakness, which is based on kind of an illusion of inequality, where you cut individuals off from the support of the collective, and that's the only thing that's making it appear weak, transforming that into this sort of expansion of equality in as we're these generations that are arising right now, yours and my generation, this sort of 25-year period of people who are between maybe 30 and 50 years old. We're going through this change right now, and the next generation is about to begin. So how is this relationship of the sexes going to play into this? And what do you see? How can we get, how can this archetype transform us?
Yeah, that's a big, a vast question. For me, it has to have, there is no other way than inner wholeness, I believe. And what you are saying as well with the work that we can do, either with other women or other men or with ourselves, it is to find that balance within. And I believe that when it comes to the 37 and the human family, if we go back to the I Ching, we see that code, that Christ code, in one human being that had that wholeness of the feminine tenderness and the masculine resolve in one being. That is the divine, that is what the magic of being human, when we can come to that place. And I believe that is a great role model for what it is. I mean, nobody would probably, like, for me, when I think about Jesus, how much ever the legend has been changed or not, for me, it doesn't feel like somebody's very feminine. It feels like somebody's very masculine and very brave, and also just has a tenderness and a universal love or unconditional love that I don't know if there's ever been anybody incarnated on this earth with that. And even if it might feel utopian and we might feel far away from that, I believe that as we're going into these uncertain times closer to 2027, and what we're already seeing with the Pluto return and the things that are falling apart in the institutional structures and on a global level, I believe that role models are the most important things to have. And somehow I think our generation, because you're speaking of this generation, we might not have had the best role models when we look at who were the people that we grew up with. They kind of had other goals, and I believe that this is for us. We are here to become our own role models. We're here to find that wholeness within, and we can inspire each other to doing that. And I'm not necessarily somebody who thinks that men should tune in so much to divine feminine and have cuddle parties and this and that. Like, I think that somehow the pendulum has also gotten a little bit too far. It's not that men have to become women almost and women have to become men almost. And then by going to the extreme, then you're going to understand the other side and put yourself in the other gender's shoes. No, that I believe that the essence of what we are already there, and the problem is that we have lost the connection with the essence. So that's the way back. We don't need to do so much on the outside. So where's the inner nurturing and the inner resolve? That's where it starts. 37 and 40 can never be separated.
I love what you're sharing, because when I was really contemplating what is the What are the energetics happening? What's going on here? Is there something absent that we need to learn and try on and take on? Or is there something hidden that's already present? And when I, when I noticed this comment that Richard Rudd had made about how the balance of the divine feminine being kind of spearheaded through the evolution of men, I started thinking about what would it take for a men's group to become socially viable as a business model, meaning someone's going to host a men's retreat, not only because it's their calling, but because there's an exchange of money that other men are going to feel like, yeah, that's really what I want to spend my money on, to go and embody the divine feminine. And when I thought about that, not that it sounds strange or unusual to me for a man to embrace their feminine qualities, but that the type of culture that we have around these subjects right now, the divine goddess, there's so much goddess embodiment happening, and the men's groups are really like trying to, from what I've seen, are really trying to purify what so many talk about as this toxic masculinity form, which, personally, I don't really subscribe to ideas that our essential qualities can be toxic. We can express anything in a low frequency, and that may be painful or harmful for other people. But at no times is any of this exchange toxic, meaning poisoning your well-being. And when I thought about that, I was like, man, there has to be a different way than attempting to create balance by engaging in flip-flopping of extremes, where suddenly the entire focus of the feminine movement becomes to have women as CEOs and women at the top of the pyramid. That actually flies in the face of everything that the feminine is waiting to gift humanity, that the mother has always given and always will give to the central experience of family. It's that complete equality that arises from that unbreakable tenderness and love that I really believe the reason, yes, it's a feminine quality, but the reason we identify it with the female sex in humanity is because within this balance of masculine and feminine throughout our forms, it is the woman, the female gender, who, when giving birth, shares biological beingness with the child, whereas the masculine principle provides only the seed. And so throughout history, we've seen this as a principle of families, that men have been primarily distant from the sort of child rearing and things going on in the home, and the women have been central. However, in the union between a man and a woman, when two individuals who have a divine inner union of masculine and feminine inside begin the process of bringing in a soul for incarnation into a body, I believe the experience of the man in that process of birthing will change. And I think we're starting to see this happen in society already. There are many places in Europe where both men and women are granted child leave after the birth of their child from their professions. That's not present in the United States yet, but hey, the Pluto just returned. Maybe there's something.
But more than that, in Sweden, I think you get 18 months. Either you get 18 months always, and if the man takes some of it, you get 6 more months, or you get 18 months and 6 of those have to be used by the father.
Right.
So there's definitely, and then you could go even to say, should these things be controlled that way, the same way of like how many women should be in the parliament? There could also be a flip side of that. But
yes. Yeah. I mean, we'll see what is going to happen. But one of the things that just strikes me as, what is the difference between doing this pendulum switch where men now take on the prior, what we might call outdated roles of the women, and the women take on the sort of patriarchal roles of the men. There needs to be a different kind of a transition that happens within us before anything can really change in our society. Okay, great. What if the world was run by women? Fantastic. If they all run it the way men ran it, they're all going to end up on the shadow spectrum, and it's going to be the cruelest world that we've ever seen. A a patriarchal form that's run by women will be probably even worse than the one that was run by men, because the cruelty that happens in reaction to the potential for tenderness through a woman's body is so intense because of that biological connection to the capability for birth. And that's maybe I can't say that as a fact, but and not to say that men running a patriarchal society didn't run a horrific and brutal and really horrible expression of that energy.
I mean, I feel like there is something kind of simple and fundamental here, and it is about reclaiming the parts. And it's not just that the masculine is lacking the feminine. I think it's about expression of essence and truth. And there are many other parts. So if you are somebody who's very much on the light masculine expression, then you need to reclaim the dark masculine. Like if you're very spirit oriented, you need to reclaim the soul and the darkness. If you're very dark, you need to reclaim the light. Where we are right now, it's reclaiming the parts of us that we haven't been in touch with, or that we, like you're saying, they're already there, but we haven't had a possibility for living them and expressing them. So in that reclaiming of parts, that's where the wholeness comes. And it doesn't, it's what you're saying. I've never even seen that as a solution for anything. And many times when in the Scandinavian countries where things are, there is an outside hand that is saying, this is how many women we have here, this is how long men have to be with children, I see a lot of confusion. And I see a lot of entitlement, and confusion and entitlement are not necessarily the words that we feel like we are going to have resolve and tenderness in this world. So I feel like very much we can see that that's not the solution. But then the question is, how can we create containers, sacred containers, where the reclaiming of the parts of us that we are missing or not in contact with, how can we create spaces that are conducive for that reclaiming of who we truly are? That's what interests me. And that's where I feel like part of the work that we're doing here, parts of the work we're doing with human design and with the Gene Keys, it allows us to retrieve, to have the remembrance of those parts of us. so we can come together, so that the fragmentation, that the whole system is showing on all levels right now, so that the fragmentation can be seen on the table. And when we can see the parts, we can also unify. And that's what the Venus sequence is about, for example. That's, you know, what I feel with the transmissions as well, in a different way, John. It's a reclaiming or a reconnecting of the parts to one whole. And then we don't have to go to any extreme and do anything on the outside, because it's all on the inside.
Yeah. So while you're talking, I've had two different ideas kind of rolling around inside while you've been speaking, Bella. And the first is kind of a wondering about, as humanity continues to change, will we one day completely shift our understanding of genders to where neither gender has a specific sort of focus of feminine or masculine in terms of our expectancy? There's so much in our society around the expectations from society that women have to fulfill. And while I believe it's also as present, it's maybe a little bit more in the shadows of the expectations that men have to fulfill. It's less of a discussion of the intense pressure upon boys growing up to be men that happens from a societal standpoint. It's not that it's more pressure than women experience. It's just that we're more aware of the pressure on women, because in general, the pressure has benefited men in an unequal way. And when I'm looking at what you're saying, Bella, it's like the structures as they evolve, if we can begin to honor the qualities that the archetype of the mother brings to family, the qualities of nurturing, of appreciating every individual uniqueness with an equal amount of tenderness and love. And these are qualities that any man, regardless of their masculine or feminine balance, can express through their own masculine nature or through their feminine nature. These things can happen just because they're qualities that represent a feminine energy. They can be expressed in any particular way. And as long as the frequency matches. And I feel like that's really where that inner marriage has to come from, is if we're willing to come together in a very, you know, I don't want to say a democratic manner, because I feel like there's so many political ramifications of that aren't necessarily so good. But somehow we have to come to an experience of mutual respect that is born from our hearts, rather than this sort of survival-based instinct that drives the mind to discover the potential for exchange. And, you know, one of the things that's mentioned, and actually the same solution that I arrived at before ever encountering human design and gene keys, was that the transformation is the heart must lead and the mind must serve that heart. What the heart values and stands up for, what we have a strength and courage to create. The mind must go to work to implement. And Bella, I wondered if you might see a particular way that the feminine blueprint might be able to be honored in a bigger way in these containers that that are the potential.
If we are seeking to be honored, we're still not in the heart.
Mm.
And that's the power of the feminine heart. And that's the power of unconditional love. We don't need anything. But when we can love that strongly, then we can receive the masculine, we can receive everything that's there. And in being received, that's when the heart opens.
Perfect contrast. My question was formed from the masculine energetic perspective of solving problems. And your answer was formed from the feminine energetic of recognizing that everything that is needed is already present. It only requires the nurturing attention of the mother. Beautiful.
And the other thing is that we're
ahead.
learning by contrast as well. So I think it would, I really believe that on this plane, as we're still human beings and we're not the raves, we're not any other race, we are here to live this world by contrast. And one of the most beautiful things is the coming together of the masculine and the feminine in those physical bodies, because that is the act of creation. That is when the seed meets the egg. That is when human life is continuing. So for me to say that we are going to be alike on the inside or on the outside, for me, it takes away a lot of just the principle of what it is to be human. So my hope is that we are going to learn to savor from the heart and from a true equality, the essence and uniqueness of what it is to be in a feminine body and a masculine body.
Awesome. I love the way that this discussion unfolded, because one of the things that I think the mother always recognizes is that she loves her children as they are, not because they change into some image of what she wishes they could be. It's not that there aren't mothers who have expectations for their children, but that core essence connection, is kind of one that is inevitable in terms of a human experience across the collective. And I think it was really interesting to recognize that this acidic frequency of tenderness will never manifest through an individual human being, as the Christ principle did in the Piscean age. This city of tenderness may one day manifest in humanity, but when it does, we'll do it as a family.
Yeah, I have one more thing, John, that I would like to share. Please. I'm actually going to share, I wasn't going to share the preview of, but I just want to share this because it speaks about what we have spoken today. If the verb that we would choose for this hexagram is collaboration, and you can see that here in the way that it's depicted, this one here is bigger and this here is smaller. So if they are collaborating and they are going to get to the other side, it makes sense that the bigger one is on the bottom and the smaller one is on the top, right? And when we look at the other symbol here, last week we were looking at the 55 and it only had this kind of star spark. And now there is something that is supporting the star. So for me, when we speak about collaboration, it's not about all of us being the same, because the collaboration when we are all the same is not as powerful as the collaboration when we're all different. So the uniqueness of your essence, for me, is that important building block, that together that you're speaking about, the tenderness that we are creating, and the beauty of that creation, because all the building blocks are not the same. We all have an essence, and part of that essence that I feel part of the healing is the acceptance of our either feminine or masculine essence, even if we have both. And there is something with that when we start to tap into that acceptance. I know that there is a depth and there's a sweetness and there's a power in that that I again long for as many of us as possible to feel and to encounter.
Yeah, beautiful. It really is amazing how many forms of wisdom are showing up around the world, and I love those images that are included in his work. There's so much in these discussions to kind of run up against walls and look around the corner in different perspectives and recognize our potential for our individual transformation that is ongoing. We've moved into the transit through Pisces, which, as everyone knows, is a water element. And with the 55, we did a water body activation. So now we've experienced in this new process a fire activation, a water activation. And today is going to be air. And what you see in the hexagram there is gentle wind over clinging fire. So this is an image that in the I Ching describes the movement of the harmony of family, the wind that is generated by a fire. A fire produces a movement of air. And when you look at the lines and their relationship to the aspects of the family, in the ancient Chinese wisdom understanding, each line refers to one role within the family. And these are essentially archetypes. And in this particular hexagram, the family is in perfect order to create harmony and to create order as the basis of society. When family reaches the balance that is seen within this this ordering of the lines, then the entire society comes into perfect harmony and balance, or it expresses the gift of equality. Bella, do you want to talk about the aspects here?
The conversation we could have had a whole series of like 16 weeks speaking about the feminine, the masculine. Like there's so much more, and there's so much I couldn't even say it because there's so much I can say. Yeah. But if there's one thing that I feel that it's boiling down to, is that you don't have to be everything. Like I know that a lot of us have had so much responsibility in our lives. We've been so much, maybe for ourselves or for other people. There's so much responsibility. And I like what it says here. The superior man speaks the truth and is consistent in its behavior. It's what this hexagram is about you are you, and there are certain things in your essence that is part of what you are doing, what your behavior is, you don't have to do everything. You have to speak your truth and be consistent with that truth. You have to be who you are and be consistent with who you are. You're not asked to be a million things. You're not asked to be everything. We can tune into our essence, and that is enough. And when we are in the family, and that's the same thing with Richard Rudd says with a family unit, 3 to 15 people, that's where the synergy starts. When you're in a family unit or a work unit of 3 to 15 people, that's where we start to see the building blocks of the collaboration when we come together as unique beings expressing our essence, that we start to see the self-organizing and how that is how we truly can thrive. And when we have those units, that's how we thrive in the bigger. So so much starts with a family unit.
Excellent. Perfect. This potential for a new form of family rising seems to be something that is going to become more and more present. And I think that as we grow more in our own truth and create more and more consistency in our behaviors that is in alignment with that truth, I think we'll discover that the families begin to form kind of without our trying to do anything about it. You know, that structure will be a natural response to our own individual contribution.
Yeah. And when we are trying to be something else, then, you know, weakness is the unease of desire. I want to be more, I want to be different, I want to be more feminine, more masculine, more powerful. You know, that's the low frequency, the intuitive lightness of your essence. That's where equality comes from. So just, yeah, there's so many ways of seeing it, but I'm going to stop sharing.
Beautiful. So to think about air as an element of the body, the first thought that we're going to have is the breath. And related to this gene key, it is natural to recognize the equality of exchange that occurs in the breath. We breathe in air, and from that air, our lungs extract the oxygen necessary to give our cells life. Oxygen is like the combustion material for energy inside our mitochondria that power the activity of the cells. We breathe out carbon dioxide. And in today's society, we often look at carbon dioxide as this bad thing because we see a correlation between the amassing of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the potential negative effects, or likely negative effects, depending on your perspective, to the survival of humanity as it exists today. However, the exchange between the human species and the plant species, or even the entire animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, is that of an equal exchange, where the plants receive the carbon dioxide that we breathe out. This is not the only way that air takes place in our bodies. On a subtle energetic level, there's a system of understanding that comes from the yogic sciences that looks at the energetic, they're called winds. And this also exists in ancient Chinese medicine as well. And in the yogic sciences, it's referred to as a vayu. And there are 5 vayus that exist within the body that govern the movements of our life systems. This refers to the energy that comes in through our breathing, the energy that moves and eliminates that which is no longer needed out of the body, the energy that churns and digests. These are winds creating movement. There's an energy of circulation that moves things throughout our body. And then there's an energy that moves things up and out as an expression of our nature. So these are the 5 forms of air that this transmission is going to be working with. And when we examine the potential for our transformation, thinking about the archetype of the mother and the gift of equality, the experience within that occurs is one of balance and harmony. So we're thinking on a very, very physical level about experiencing harmony in the body, in the way that the system functions. And in many disciplines, that always begins first with the breath. So that if you are experiencing disharmony, begin with the breath. And from there, your awareness will grow in and expand to learn more about the systems and how they're functioning together, and how you can bring it into greater harmony. So just like Bella said, you don't have to know everything or be perfect in your own individual harmony to be a part of this evolutionary process.